Welcome again, Reverend Beckford, who has been leading us on this journey. And we look forward to the study again tonight and hand over to you now, Reverend Beckford. All yours.
All right. Thank you, Sister Georgia. Good night, everyone.
Night.
Rev.
All right, great.
Night.
All right, good to hear everybody. Good to have you on this platform. And thank you so much, Reverend Smelly, for your prayers. Really appreciate those words and those requests. And always a pleasure to be in this space as we seek to get into the word of the Lord. So welcome everyone, those who are here, our regulars, welcome. Those who are visiting with us, welcome to our Bible study. Again, another Wednesday here at the Grace family, Grace Missionary Church family, as we gather around the table of God's word to hear what God will have to reveal to us. So I want to say welcome to everyone. And I know some folks might be late in coming in because we've had some evening showers. And I think last evening was the same pattern. And this evening, again, we're having the showers in the evening. And boy, what a time to be in traffic in Kingston. I wouldn't want to be in it. And so we pray that those who are out there will have a safe journey home. All right. In our last study, we looked at the book of Jonah. In our last two studies, and in this month and last month, we have been looking at saved to serve. And so we are going to continue on that trajectory today and next week. Next week is our final week. And I want our study to segue into an aspect of service that we have not really spoken about, but I think the book that we are about to get into will help us to reflect on that aspect of service. You know, we have been focusing on service within the church, and we have been focusing on service within our vocational areas, various disciplines, and you know, whatever space that God has given us, whatever platform He has prepared for us. You know, we have been talking about how we can serve and serve Him well in these particular areas. But there is another very important, vital space, that context that I believe if we drop the ball there as God's people, then, as they would say, all hell can break loose, not just for us, but I believe for society. And so as a people, we're not only saved to serve within the context of church ministry or within the context of our vocation and our calling outside of the four walls, but we are also called to serve within the home, within our family. We're called to serve our relatives, those who are close, immediate family, those who are extended family members. We're called to serve them. And there are times when it's either or for some of us who serve. We feel as if we have to choose either between our family and the service of God. But you know, I think we have to change that narrative, because it's not an either or. It is to understand that as husband and wife and son and daughter and aunt and uncle and you know and parent, whatever role we play within the family, we are called to serve those persons who are biological family. And I think the book that we're going to be looking at will help us to just look at what ways we can actually offer service to those we consider family. And, in a time like this where, family has been affected by the pandemic because, of the social distancing or the physical distancing, and, people do not get the kind of visits that they would normally get, before the pandemic. We have to be very, very deliberate in ensuring that we are mindful of the service that we give to our family members. So I'm going to change up things a little bit tonight. I want to do something that I've never done with this group. I've done it with other groups on this platform, and I'm going to ask the host or one of the hosts to actually prepare for me 4 rooms, because I'm going to break us up into 4 rooms or 4 groups, and we're going to do a little work for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and then we will gather to discuss our findings. But the first time I'm doing it, the first time I'm doing it with our group, and I'm hoping it can work for us tonight as we break up into mini groups. Now, like Jonah, the Book of Ruth is a short narrative, a short story. If you were to copy and paste the Book of Ruth from Bible Gateway or any other online source and just paste it in a Word document, you may get around 5 pages, about 2,000 or so, or 2,400 words, right? You would get. So it's not a very long, extensive narrative. It's very short, gets to the point, and the plot is fast and furious. And we want to examine the book over the next 2 weeks in terms of the characters that are presented in this book and how they can help us to understand the parallels that we see with those characters in regard to family and servant family and our families in the 21st century. Things are, we're far removed from that ancient time, but there are some lessons, I believe, that we can take away. So as the host prepares for me the rooms, here are the instructions. So group one or room 1 will get chapter 1 of Ruth. And what you're really going to do is just read through it as a group. First, you need to choose a leader. So I'm going to ask you to choose a leader in your group. You're going to read through the chapter that I give to you, and then you're going to summarize it as a group. And when we gather, you can choose maybe 1 or 2 people from your group who will present the summary. All right. So group 1 or room 1, you will get Ruth chapter 1. Room 2 or group 2, you will get chapter 2. And then group 3, room 3, you will get chapter 3. And the final group will get chapter 4. So you're going to read a breakaway for about, it's now 7:29, 7:30. So we're going to break away for about 5 to 10 minutes. We're going to regather. We'll take you about 5 to 10 minutes to read through it and then discuss what you find in your particular chapter. And all I need from you is a summary of the chapter, the summary of the findings in those particular chapters. And when we regroup, we're going to go in the order of each chapter. So chapter 1 will go first, 2, 3, and then 4. So that's how we're going to navigate for the next 10 minutes. And so I'm going to ask if we are ready. Everybody understand what we're doing? And everybody is good. We have about 36 people on right now. If we go into 4 groups, then we'll have about 9 people in each group. And I'm going to charge you to choose a leader, get your group members talking among yourselves, and then we will regroup in another 10 minutes by 10:40. So Brother Cleve horses break up into rooms. So once you get that link to go into your room, just go ahead and accept that, and you will enter a room or a particular group. Brother Cleve or Andrew, you ready for me?
Yes, I'm ready. Okay.
All right, so we're going to do that now.
Okay.
So once you get the invite, just go ahead and join. As soon as folks come in, we just assign them to a group. They're coming in.
Some people haven't joined their group.
Yeah, I realize some folks haven't joined.
Okay, I'm counting down from 8 minutes now.
All right, 8 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've been in there about 2 minutes. So
Okay.
I was going to do 10, but I didn't start the countdown.
Okay. Yeah, shouldn't give them have to read through. Should take maybe about 3 hours to read, and then to discuss it.
So for the persons who are still with us, you have been assigned a room. So you should have seen the prompt to join the room.
screenshot them. Yeah.
They have a little less than 3 minutes to go.
All right. Good, good. Ready to go. All right.
Okay, I'm going to close the rooms and have them rejoin now.
All right, great.
All breakout rooms now closed.
But he actually learned that she how kind she was to to Naomi, and that basically.
Together.
Welcome back, everybody.
We're back together.
I think the time was too short, Rev.
Time was told you. Give me a second.
Some
I'm
groups are
excited with the
still-
technology there.
Some groups are still talking.
No, you've taken us out of our room, so we can't continue the discussion, and we didn't get anywhere. 10 minutes at the most would be good.
So did you guys get a chance to choose a leader, number one, for your group?
No.
Yes, we have a leader
We
with a total
didn't get a chance to discuss it.
You didn't get a chance to discuss it.
No.
On the spot, we could choose Lindley just on the spot.
Is that for, so here's what is important. Did you get a chance to put together the summary?
No.
No.
Room 1, yes.
So.
Brother Brown is our leader for room 1.
No, that is not true.
But he summarized it so well. So, Brother Brown, please indulge us.
That's not fair. All right, so.
Right. So, Elder Brown, you're group 1?
I think so, but Sister Marcia is ready to talk.
No, I'm not ready to
I
talk.
can't do it justice like you.
Listen, we did not get time. We just read it through. We were just about to discuss and summarize. So you said 5 to 10 minutes. I'm certain that wasn't 10 minutes.
Yes, that's what we got. I typed it.
It was.
Actually,
We
more than
got 10 minutes.
But maybe 10 minutes was not enough.
Oh, so you guys needed more than the 10 minutes.
We could still highlight a few points.
All right.
Marcia?
Yes, Arlene.
It's all right. I'll just do a quick summary, as quick as whatever, because we
Thank you, Arlene.
We don't really get it, but we'll just do whatever.
Yeah, what? Yeah, which group?
4.
All right, so you have 4. So who were the folks in room 1, group 1? You got chapter
I
1.
was in group 1.
All right.
For
And
group
so
1, we have Arlene B, Audrey Vassell, Catherine, Marsha, Noel, Pauline Garvey, Paula, and Prunella.
All right.
That's group 1.
You guys got a chance to read through it though.
Yes.
We read through it, yes.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and hear your summary.
Marsha, you're going to do it, or you want me to do it? Marsha?
Go ahead, Sister P.
Sister Prunella, since you're volunteering, go ahead.
All right, I'm trying to do it from memory, yeah?
All right, Sister Prunella.
All right, we have a situation where this family had left from Bethlehem, Judah, to go to this country because of famine in the land. And the family settled in this new country, Moab, and established certain roots there in terms of the having children, etc. And then the husband died, and the situation changed, and the sons married women from that town. And after a number of years, 10 years to be precise, the sons died. So both the woman and her daughters-in-law were now widows. Now, having heard that things had changed somewhat in her hometown, the woman Naomi determined that she would go back home. But in going back home, she decided that she would not take her daughters-in-law with her, but she asked them to go back to their maternal homes. But one decided that she would return, but the other, Ruth, determined that she would, wherever her mother-in-law was going, she would be going with her, and decided that she would be staying with her until she died, and that she would be dealing with her God, whoever her God was. She would be praying for that God. And then Naomi went back home and was greeted well by those persons back in Bethlehem, Judea.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's it. I don't remember anything else.
Okay. Anybody from your group want to add? That was really good. That was excellent.
Yeah,
I think you captured the major plot from that chapter. Go ahead, Elder.
Just a few additions that I think the passage showed a lot about God's favor to Ruth. It shows the importance of love and friendship. It shows the lamentation of Naomi, who said, "Don't call me Naomi," which is a good name, but call me Mara, which is a bitter name.
Bitter, right?
So it showed two sides of a story: the famine, the death, the moving back to the country where she was received, and where Ruth, of course, was shown a lot of favor by the Lord, and then she ended up having to help her mother-in-law, who was in some difficulties as well.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Wonderful. And what's interesting about that chapter as well is
that's on the next chapter.
What's interesting about chapter 1 is it seems as if it was on the way back to Bethlehem that Naomi actually said to the young ladies, return home. They had started on the journey with her, and maybe she had agreed at that point, but somewhere along the journey, she said to them, okay, go back home. Wonderful. We'll get into some more details from that chapter as we unpack this wonderful narrative. So Ruth and Naomi are home in Bethlehem, Judah. Chapter 2, what do you have to add in terms of summary to this story now? They are back home. What happens now?
All right. I have been trusted with this group 2 leadership. I don't think I can run.
You can't run from leadership, man. There you go.
This is a case now where, having returned to Bethlehem, Ruth and Naomi, of course, with nothing in terms of possession, they had to live. So the decision was taken that Naomi, Ruth decided that she would go on and work, as they say, pick up after in the fields that the harvest that was the grains that we were reaping. So Ruth entered a field unknown to her, which was owned by a relative of Naomi, Boaz, a kind man, a man of means. So she entered that field and started picking up, gleaning after the harvesters. And she actually found out that the field belonged to Boaz, who was from the same clan as her mother-in-law, Naomi. Boaz actually found out that she was related in terms of the daughter-in-law of Naomi, and he knew, and he would have heard how kind Ruth was to Naomi. So that literally found extra favor with him, and in light of that, he decided that he would instruct his harvesters not to trouble her, but to basically leave extra grain behind so that she could pick it up. He actually offered her lunch, so he was very kind to her because he realized that she was a special young woman, and he wanted her and Naomi not to suffer, but to at least ride through their misfortune. Boaz essentially was responding to Ruth's faithfulness towards his relative Naomi, and as he indicated that he gave instructions to the workers to leave grain behind, thus provided, which provided extra for her. And he instructed the men not to trouble her, not to stop her, but to show her kindness. Essentially, that was what this chapter was about.
Thanks.
May I add to that?
Go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. Well, of course, looking below the surface. So here was Ruth, who chose not to stay home and pray that she would get food or pray for grain. She went out because what I say the underlying meaning of this is God in our lives, that we have to go out and work. Like, for example, we can't sit here and say that we hope a pastor drop in our laps. We hope that we can do this and do that. Notice that she took the initiative and she went out, because that's what I got from the chapter. She took the initiative and went out, even though she could stay home. And then having gone out now, the Lord is blessing her, not only with just grain, but this man who was a kingsman, and blessing her with that type of friendship, so she could also help not only her family, but other people.
No, Brother Orville, I want you to hold that point, and you have said it, and I'm glad you made it, because later on in a little bit, we're going to look at as we look at the summaries, to look at how the characters are developed and some traits of these characters. And we're going to come back to this Ruth character and see some traits that I think can help us to understand her better and her relationship with a Naomi and with a Boaz. And that is a trait that I don't think we need to miss. Her industry, her ability to take initiative, especially knowing that she was not, quote unquote, at home, but she was a foreigner, she was a stranger, right? And that's a very, very, very interesting point. All right, thank you, group 2. Thank you. Group 3, chapter 3. So Ruth and Naomi are back home. Ruth has found herself in the field of Boaz. There is the story is building, and the author is developing this kind of relationship between Ruth, Naomi, and Boaz, but specifically Ruth and Boaz. What does chapter 3 provide for us in terms of the continuation of this story?
So, sir, I will do some talking. We never really identified a leader, but I did the majority of the talking while
while you were in the group there.
Yes, so I will continue.
All right.
So we saw a healthy relationship being displayed between Naomi and Ruth, mother-in-law, daughter-in-law type of relation. Michelle, who was in the group, chuckled because she said, boy, mother-in-law getting and daughter-in-law getting on very well. So Ruth was willing to undertake the instructions of Naomi, right? And we did not see any evidence of resistance whatsoever. So she trusted Naomi, and she went. She went, bathed, put on perfume, and went out. Right? There she was, and this is the part that had me concerned, But before I go there, Naomi was very strategic in her instructions. She told Ruth exactly what to do.
Step by step.
And almost step by step, and she and Naomi undertook. We saw when Boaz was a kingsman, a shrewd businessman as well. And when he woke up and realized somebody was there, and and the likes, I said to myself, whoa, a young girl land at his feet, But he said people knew of her before, and she was of noble character. So Ruth's character was known even before she came and she laid at his feet. And he protected just that. We saw when she was leaving, he sent her home to her mother-in-law with grain. He measured out 6 shekels, whatever it was, 6 units of barley grain, and he gave it to her for her to take to the mother-in-law. So she did not go home empty-handed whatsoever. Yes?
All right.
So that is what I share. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, and just to finish off, Naomi, we see again her thinking. She said, wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today.
All right.
The matter of the kinsman. And we know that the kinsman would have had the responsibility of looking after the extended family, as in their case, their husbands had died. So we see that he, being a kinsman now, would have volunteered, but he recognized, and we are going to see that in the next chapter. I won't press on.
All right. So the theme of the kinsman redeemer is introduced in this chapter 3.
Yes.
And it is revealed clearly in chapter 4. So let's hear chapter 4. How does the story end? This is the final chapter. Ruth and Naomi and Boaz, it has come to a climax now. How does it end for them?
All right, so what we're seeing in chapter 4 is the culmination of everything. Obviously, we are seeing Boaz. He is in love with Ruth. They want to get married, but he is aware of the fact there is a kinsman who is closer to redeem the land. So what he does, he shrewdly, I would want to say shrewdly, goes to the elders, and then he speaks to the kinsman, the one who is closest or should be entitled to the land, etc. And he puts it in such a way that it would appear that it's just the land that is up to be redeemed. So, of course, the elders are there, everybody's there. The kinsman, he quickly agreed to that because he's thinking that it's only the land that will be redeemed. So he agrees to that. But then Boaz hits him with what he says. He says, no, the land that Naomi has is not only that you would have to redeem, you have to redeem just the other things that comes along with it. So he then puts into the picture all the other things, including Ruth that he would now have to marry Ruth. So of course, my good friend, he is not into that because it would appear that he may have already had connections. He was not into that. So he then gives Boaz the right to redeem the land, which of course be the kinsman redeemer, and he takes that on gladly. And of course, what we see how the chapter ends is that we really see God's hand is all over history. God, after generation, the genealogy is really a striking way to bring before us the continuity of God's purpose through the ages, because it ends with giving you the whole genealogy where that is concerned, and you see, you know, Obed coming in, so you can clearly trace the genealogy, and points to the importance of the genealogy in the whole aspect of Christ himself. So that's basically the summary of chapter 4.
Thank you, Arlene. What struck me about your presentation is that you used a contemporary term to describe what happened between Boaz and Ruth. You said that he fell in love with Ruth.
Yes.
You know, this week, I don't want to focus so much on that quote unquote love story between the two. Next week, we want to look at that in more detail as we talk more about man and woman story in terms of service, you know, the ultimate, the ancient first relationship established, and we see it also here unpacked in this book. But it was interesting that you use that term because the question is, was it a matter of how we would term in love? Was he in love with her, or was it a noble act by this man as he served this woman or
the man was in love with her. It was not a noble act. He was in love with her.
Sister Arlene, make sure no matter
where you go, romantic.
No matter what you do next week, make sure you're here. You know? No matter where you are, make sure you're here next week, because we want to talk some more about that, about whether or not it was nobility or, as we coin it, in love. Thank you so much. That was good. That was excellent.
He was attracted to her, Pastor.
He was
attracted to her.
What's the evidence we have for that now in the book?
No, because guess what? He speaks his actions towards her, and he knew of her kindness. He commended her on her kindness towards her mother-in-law. And I think once a man is hearing those things about this beautiful girl, he's something going through his mind. Right, Arlene? Something going through his mind, and he's saying, okay, you know, this is when she lay down that night, like he said, guess what? I am so, in my words, I'm so pleased that you chose me over all the young men. So something I go on.
Something I go on. Sister Paula said, boy, he invited her to lunch. So there you go. That's it. That's nice. But, you know, I really want us to get into that, next week, because it really is a story that shows the dynamics between, you know, the man and woman relationship. And hey, look at what happened. Here you find two women, Naomi mother-in-law and Ruth daughter-in-law, who decided that they were going after the man. If we want to talk modern language, let's talk it that way, that they decided that there is a catch, let's go after him. So, you know, interesting things.
Just like that.
Interesting things, right? But let's go back to chapter 1, because Ruth is an interesting book, and what I love about it is that it starts off with a focus on a man or men. It ends really with also a focus on men, you know. But the story is about the resilience of the woman. You know, the story really takes on the form of highlighting two ancient women who were battling in a society for their very life, for their very sustenance. But it begins with this man Elimelech, and it ends with the genealogy of David. You know, and what is interesting is we don't say this a lot. Ruth is actually who? The grandmother of who? Is she the grandmother or the great-grandmother?
Great-grandmother of David.
The great-grandmother of King David. We don't talk like that, you know. We normally talk about the patriarchal lineage, you know. So David's father was Jesse and Obed was his grandfather. But we have to say that here's this Moabite, a stranger, a foreigner, who is actually the great-grandmother of King David. And what is interesting is that she is one of a couple women, Rahab, Bathsheba, who are mentioned in the genealogy in Matthew there of Jesus Christ, right? What is interesting about this story as well is the beginning, that introduction in chapter 1, right? That introduction gives us a little information about the background. So let me ask you a few questions. What is the historical setting for this book? At what time in Israel's history are these matters are so forth unfolding in the book of Ruth? Where is the setting in Israel's history? Anybody? It's right there in chapter 1. It's right there as you read it.
Time of the judges.
In the time of the judges, right? Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so yeah. A book like Judges and leading up right up until 1 Samuel's 8, that is the historical context we find for a book like Ruth. It is set in the time of the judges such as Gideon, Samson, Ehud, Jephthah, Deborah, and others. This is the time. So there is no king in Israel at this time, but it is set during this period. As to when it was actually written, you know, we could argue that it was written after the time period, but it was written during a time where Israel had no central leadership. Another question is this. Who were the Moabites? That's where they went. They left Bethlehem. And the word for Bethlehem, it's translated Bethlehem, but it really means house of bread. House of bread, right? And what it says in verse 1, that they left the house of bread. Elimelech left the house of bread with his wife and his 2 sons because the house of bread had no bread. There was famine. And they went to Moab. Who are the Moabites? Anybody?
Descendants of Lot.
Descendants of Lot, yes.
Incest.
From the incestuous relationship between Lot and his, was it the first daughter, I think? The old
Not of the sure, but one was Moab, one was Ammon.
And one was Ammon, right. So that was the relationship that gave rise to this people group, the Moabites. Now, what is also interesting, which is going to lead us to another question, is during the period of the judges, it seemed as if the Moabites and Israel were not really on good accord. Let's turn a little bit to Judges. Judges chapter 3, verses 12. And read a little bit there. Judges 3, verse 12. And this is the story of the judge Ehud, right? Judges 3, verse 12 says, once again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. And because they did this evil, the Lord gave Eglon, king of Moab, power over Israel, right? And then when you look down to verses 28 to 30, it said here, Follow me, he ordered. That's Ehud there, I think, talking. For the Lord has given Moab, your enemy, into your hands. So they followed him down, and taking possession of the fords of the Jordan that led to Moab, they allowed no one to cross over. At that time, they struck down 10,000 Moabites, all vigorous and strong. Not a man escaped. That day, Moab was made subject to Israel, and the land had peace for 80 years. And you can also read in Judges 10, verse 6, another reference to the Moabites there in Judges 10, verse 6. The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. They served the Baals and the Ashtoreths and the gods of the Aram, the gods of Aram, the gods of Sidon, the gods of Moab, the gods of the Ammonites, and the gods of the Philistines. So the question is, why did Elimelech migrate with his family to Moab? Why did they migrate? Why did they leave?
Because of the famine. They didn't have any food.
They left because of the famine. If the plain sense makes sense, add no other sense, because you're going to end up with nonsense. So they left because of they left because of the famine. Even though we have this historical help from the book of Judges in regard to the relationship between Moab and Israel, we are not sure at what point during the period of the Judges that Elimelech left with his family for Moab. We're not sure. We are not sure if it was a time when there was peace between them. We are not sure if there was a time when there was war between the two nations. We are not sure if Elimelech and his family were one of those charged or accused of taking on the gods of the Moabites. We are not sure. It is not said. It's just pure speculation. But what we do know is that here is a family that recognized that if they stayed in Israel, Bethlehem of Judah, chances are their survival will be low. So they did like what any family or many families would have done. They sought a better life, right? They sought a better life. And as Sister Sonia said, similar to how Jacob went to Egypt during the famine, as did Abraham. Exactly. So here is famine. We want food. They moved. However, it proved tragic, this land of Moab, for this family. So let's talk a little bit, right? Before we get to the character of Naomi and what was happening to her family, let's talk a little bit about the characters that we find in this story, right? We have Ruth, major characters. We have Boaz. We have Naomi. But we have some minor characters. We have Elimelech, tongue twister, that one. We have Marlon, we have Shilian. And normally I don't pay a lot of attention to the meaning of names, because some people go off on a trajectory that is just sometimes too far-fetched. But for the book of Ruth, the names in this book, their original meaning, do have significance for the development of the story. So what can we say? I'm going to leave Naomi for last because we're going to kind of just zone in on her for a little bit. But let's talk about Ruth. What kind of woman do we have presented in this story based on what we see in the story? What kind of traits can we use to describe her? Let's find about three. Brother Orville started us off. Is there anybody else that can tell us? Loyal. Give me the evidence for her loyalty, Sister Paula, if you can talk. What's the evidence in the story for Ruth's loyalty?
So she left her country for a strange country.
Mm-hmm.
And as a woman, I am allowing my sanctified imagination to think that she perhaps would have been despised by the persons in the town. they're seeing her as an outsider, as we discussed the history of Moab, coming from incest, etc. And I think the story behind
our people is not a good story.
No, and I think I recall that God had given some instructions to the Israelites not to be too chummy, not to have close interactions with certain of the peoples around them. So she was coming into an atmosphere where she would not have been accepted, but because of her love and her respect for Naomi and her admiration of Naomi's spiritual commitment to her God, the big G, because it reminds me of when Rahab had told the spies that the stories of how their God rescued Israel, had spread to all of the other people. So there was something about Naomi and Naomi's lifestyle that she wanted a part of. And despite the challenges and the difficulties, she was not going to leave her. So that's why I said that she's loyal.
Loyal. And the famous verse that we all had to learn. If you grew up in church, we all had to learn that at some point in Sunday school. That was the golden text is taken from, or the memory verse is taken from.
Entreat me not to leave thee, nor to return from following after you.
Yes, that's the famous verse. One of the all-time verses in the scriptures. And I tell you something, even when you read it now in the modern translations, we grew up on the King James version, and you still have the King James memory verse in your head. Where you go, I will go. Your people shall be my people, your God, thy God. So forth. It spoke to her loyalty. I saw some other comment. A supportive woman, John said. Sister Sonia said compassionate. And she says caring. It's not just abandoned her daughters-in-law, but wanted them to return to safe. Oh, well, that's Naomi there. And so we can say she's loyal, like what Brother Orville said earlier. She took initiative. What anything else about her character that we can find pulsated in this particular book? Another one.
She's selfless.
Loyal. What's that, Sister Arlene?
Selfless. She's selfless.
Selfless. Indeed. Here you find a Moabite who is leaving her home. She's going into Israel, into really a hostile region. And not only that, she's relocated into a hostile region. Her family is on hard times. Hard times for her family. Her mother-in-law has nothing to offer. And Naomi told them that. She said, listen, even if I should get married tonight and have a child tomorrow, it's not going to happen for you guys. So she was entering hostile ground, but she was also entering, she had entered into the family, but the family was going through a difficult period. But she was resilient, devoted to this woman, even though her security was not sure. Another thing I think about her as well is that she was decisive. When Naomi said to her and Orpah, thank you, Sister Marcia. Orpah is also one of the characters, not Oprah, no, Orpah, right? Orpah. So when Naomi said to them, hey, guess what? Go back home. I have nothing to give to you. Ruth was decisive in her. She said, listen, she's determined to go. And we see that as well, even in her encounter with Boaz, right? She was not daunted by what she was surrounded by, her realities. She had a task. Her family needed food. Her family needed some level of security. She respected Naomi, and she was decisive in how she went about her business. you know, Sister Maggie, oh yes, I to observe the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law harmony. Sister Maggie, welcome, YouTubers. You know, sorry the YouTubers were not able to join in the group session. You know, I think I can maybe make some money there by maybe creating something that YouTube people can. Who wants to join me in my quest? But welcome to the YouTubers. Thank you for joining us, Sister Maggie. Good to have you. And what a night, because normally when we are in the physical space, Sister Maggie is used to the group work and the interaction. So good to have you, Sister Maggie, with us. And all the other YouTube followers, thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk now a little bit about Boaz. Who was this man? What can we use to describe this man from the book? What is the evidence there about his character? We're going to talk about him and Ruth more next week, but what can we say about him? Like that, Sister Paul. Unfortunately, some persons of a certain orientation have reportedly stolen the beautiful words exchanged between Ruth and Naomi, and are said to use them for their ceremonies. Achoo, achoo, achoo. That's true. They have turned it into romance. Elder Brown, are you talking? I see your thing.
Anyway.
Sister Marcia, go ahead. Talk to me about Boaz. What
Boaz,
kind of man is this? How can we describe him?
A man of integrity.
Man of integrity.
All right. And a man who also, from what we see, was very kind-hearted and was also mindful of defending Ruth, protecting her, a protector, I would also call him.
Right, so he was a protector, man of integrity. I see there he was honorable, respected man, Cleve said. Yes.
He was a wealthy landowner as well.
He was a wealthy man, which makes us think, you know, if Elimelech had such a family member like this during the famine, you know, I wonder about Boaz during that time. Is it that he remained in the land, or maybe he would have migrated as well? But you know, again, it's just you know, you can allow your imagination to run wild. But here is Elimelech, and it would maybe infer to us that Elimelech was also a man of some means. You know, it could be that as well, because here is Boaz, quite a wealthy man, a man of means. What else about him? There's something else about him too, you know, not only of his affluence, you know, not only about his affluence. And thank you, Orville, it was also a religious man. There's something else about him too. He's a man of integrity, a man of means, a religious man, honorable, respected. What else? Respected.
I think it's Brother Lindley who raised the point that he was a shrewd businessman. I would add to that to say he was a good manager. He knew how to handle his workers,
right,
and to get maximum production out of them.
Right.
Go
ahead, Elder Noel.
I think too that I get the impression that he was a protector of the weak.
Yes.
Right? Because he didn't have to ask his workmen to leave behind the grain so that she could gather them. The average shrewd businessman collects every cent, but he was not doing that. He was leaving something behind so that the needy, in this case Ruth, could gather them to take care of both herself and her mother.
And Elder Brown, this is something that would be known to the Israelites in their laws, you know, in terms of the widow and the orphans when they are gleaning in the field. You know, if it falls, leave it alone, you know. so that they, as you're right, those who are needy, the vulnerable in society can get it.
Can get it, yeah.
He was very adamant that that must happen, and he ensured that his workers were of no harm to Ruth, a foreigner, and suggesting that as a foreigner, and Ruth said it, boy, you're kind to me as a foreigner, suggesting that the others within his community could have done some harm to this young lady.
Oh, right.
Mm-hmm. The love in his heart was expressed outwardly. Somebody had said also that he sat at the gate, and we may miss that because that's a cultural statement in chapter 4. Boaz went to the town gate and sat there. Now, if you know a little bit about Old Testament history, who were the people who sat at the gate? The gate was known as a place of what?
Well-to-do people, high standing.
Well-to-do people, high standing,
knowledgeable.
They were at the gates, you know, that's where decisions were taken. It was like a judicial place. It was like a seat of judgment, right? And so it suggests to us, that Boaz too was a man of political means and power, right? He was a part of the hierarchy of society in terms of decisions that were taken, whether it was judicial or, you know, in terms of people's social well-being and so forth. So that is something to note about him. This is a good catch, ladies. This man is a good catch. The man is spiritual. The man is wealthy. The man has power. But we
he has integrity.
We see a man who has integrity, who cares for the outcasts and those who are downtrodden. We see a man who is protective of those who are vulnerable in society. Right? We're going to talk about Boaz and Ruth next week. Let's zero in now on who I think is a major character. By the way, back up a little bit. Let's give the meaning of their names as we talk through them. Ruth actually means companion or friend, right? Female companion or friend or neighbor. The word Boaz or the name Boaz actually means friend, right? Elimelech really means God is king. God, and Melech king. God is king. And interesting that the book begins with Elimelech, God is king, and ends with the genealogy about the ultimate king of Judah. Interesting thoughts there. That's not down the road we're going. Another thing too is that Mahlon and Chilion, one actually meant sickly and the other meant end, right? And not really good names for these two young men, right? So let's talk about Naomi now. Talk to me about it. What kind of woman do we find here? She's a family member that we want to zero in on. We don't want to talk about the Boaz yet. We have those family members, you know, that boy, life of the party, the life of the family, the name in the family, the status one in the family, right? We have the kind of Ruth as well in the family. Let's talk about this Naomi, family member that, who you say is, go ahead. Who's talking? Sister Arlene Prunella?
Prunella.
Yeah, what you say now, Sister Prunella? Who is
She's shrewd. Shrewd.
She's shrewd.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about that. Why would you say she's shrewd?
In terms of when Ruth had gone back and related to her what had happened, then she was able to determine what it is Ruth needed to do, because she was looking ahead to see that this was here now is a prospect for Ruth. And she was able to instruct Ruth as to what she ought to be doing to ensure that her position is, I would say, cement.
So she recognizes her reality, her situation,
yes.
and she sees a way out, and she employs a plan for that.
Right.
A shrewd plan. Right. That's a point to note about her character. Somebody else says here, Naomi was a woman who had faced major, Sister Sonia said, she had faced major adversities. She must have felt hopeless at times along the journey. Why would she,
say so too,
what were some of the adversities that she faced?
Losing
her husband and losing 2 sons. That's 3 deaths.
3 deaths in the space of 10 years, really.
The space of 10 years, yeah.
Yeah, in the space of 10 years, this woman has become a widow, number 1. Number 2, she has become childless. And what that has done for her is that it has plunged her into what? A state of poverty.
And no grandchildren up to that point, Rev. No grandchildren.
She has no grandchildren as yet to continue on the family lineage.
And one of the things about it is that she would have left her homeland and gone to a strange place as well. So, I mean, you pulling up roots and going into a strange place, as you say, down near Moab, knowing that this is not my people, so to speak. These are the enemies of my people, so to speak. That in itself would take a toll on you.
But here's the thing too, you know, and she left her homeland to go to a land for better.
For better, right.
But she hasn't gotten better. She has gotten worse. You know, and this has, how do we know that this has taken a toll on her? What are some of her words? This has taken a toll on her.
She said she came back.
Call me Mara. Call me Mara.
She said, call me Mara. And here's the thing too, her name Naomi actually means pleasant.
Delightful.
Right? Delightful. But Mara means bitter. Do you think that this woman was bitter against God for what had happened to her?
Yes. Yes.
She was probably bitter.
Yes, she was.
I think she was.
Yes, she was.
I think she was. When she,
I think there was something in one of those chapters that you said.
Well, let's look at when she got back home. When she got back home, there was a stir said in the community, and everybody was, wow, Naomi's back home, and suggested to us that Naomi and Elimelech again were people
were well known.
Were well known in this community.
Yes.
Right? She's back home, and then she said, listen, don't, in verse 20 of chapter 1, don't call me Naomi, she told him, call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter.
Right. Wow. She would have been bitter.
I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth, her daughter-in-law, and she arrived in the barley harvest during the season of the barley harvest. So she was, as we would say, in a spiritual state of darkness. It seems as if Naomi was experiencing the dark hour of the night.
Oh, yeah.
In verse 13, he said, it is more bitter for me than it is for you, when she was speaking to Ruth.
In verse 13.
13.
Yes, of chapter 1.
Right.
Right. There you go. And she wanted Ruth to stay. She didn't want Ruth to come with her. But it's interesting what Sister Prunella said earlier, because in chapters 3, when she recognized that there's a kingsman redeemer, and that, you know, this is a man who could actually get her and her family out of this state, she devised a plan. And what I love about Naomi, which maybe is the reason why Ruth said, I'm going to stick with this woman, because even though she was bitter, she was in a very low space. Let us not just, chastise her character. In chapter 3, verse 1, it says, one day Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, should I not try to find a home for what? For you, where you will be provided for. It's not Boaz with whose servant girls you have been, kingman of ours. So Naomi, see, her plan had Ruth's best interest, it seemed, at heart.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we can ignore that.
Where Ruth goes, she will go also.
So here we find that it seemed as if both women were really affecting each other in a very positive way, and trying to get themselves out of this particular dilemma that the family has found themselves in. So let's try and bring it home a little bit here. Right, there's some points there, a lot of points being made in the chat room about Naomi was a woman. Yeah, we said that. She is motherly in a patriarchal world. Yes. And let us not forget, Naomi then would be the great grandmother of who?
David.
King David. Let's not forget that now, right? Let's not forget that. Naomi's spiritual lifestyle had a strong impact on her daughter's in-law. She evangelized Ruth. Physical journey to Bethlehem is symbolic of her emotional upheaval. And there's much more right said there. Thank you all for those comments. Here's a thing about Naomi that has contributed, and I want us to speak maybe 5 minutes about it before we end tonight, talking about family members. Naomi was a widow. She was a widow. She lost her husband. She was also motherless. The Bible has a lot to say to us about widows, doesn't it?
Yes.
And the question that we have to ask ourselves is this. Here's a parallel. The widows that we have within our families, we have them in our biological families. We also have them in our spiritual church family. Number of women that we know, and also men who are, the women widows, the men who are widowers. And we also have, what Naomi also shows us is that there are parents among us within our space who have lost children as well. Naomi shows us is that this can take a great toll on an individual, to the point where it can actually steal the joy and the delight that that person once had. This is the character that we're dealing with. And the question that we need to reflect on and to apply, I believe, in our setting is, how do we in practical ways ensure that a widower, someone who is who has lost their child or their children, how can we ensure that they are catered for? Because that's the Ruth ministry. That's the Ruth ministry right there. Ruth ensured, and here's the thing about Ruth. Ruth herself was a widow. She was a widow, and so she too would have had her emotional experience, but she's not painted as a Naomi. She's painted as the channel or the vehicle for the family's redemption. But the Naomi character presents to us a woman who is crushed, as Psalms 8:34 says. She's crushed in spirit. Orville said, Naomi did not remain in her bitterness, but like most women, in spite of their own internal emotion, she reached out to care for others. Ruth and Naomi, they both did, I believe, because Naomi also tried to help Ruth in this scenario. So they were crushed. And, I don't want the men to feel any way tonight as we speak about these women, but there are several things that can cause a woman to be crushed in spirit. The loss of a husband, the loss of a child. We're in breast cancer month. This is October where we talk about breast cancer. That too can be a challenge for some women and men too. You know, men, they say, do have are also prone to that particular cancer, but it's prevalent in the female gender. Those things can crush people. Those things can change the narrative for people. And we have to ask ourselves, let's talk a little bit. How can we be like the Ruth in the story and offer care to those members of our family, immediate family, or families, biological families, and the church family? How can we, in practical ways, give that level of support? I hear you thinking. I hear you thinking. Because this is where the rubber meets the road. At the end of the day, this is the parallel. A woman is crushed in spirit here in this story. We have women on this platform, women in our church, but women in our families, women in our families who have been crushed by losses, crushed by disappointment, crushed by a wrong path. This is migration gone wrong. Migration gone awry. You know, her husband led the family into another land, and in leading the family into a land, the family lost everything. And some women can testify about that. Bad investment, bad business deal, and the woman is left to carry the weight. You know, the Temptation song, Papa was a rolling stone, you know.
On that note, Pastor,
yes,
it can be said that the ladies, the women are the burden bearers within the society.
Well, exactly. And what a burden they carry, Elder. What a burden they carry. You know, Sister Sonia says that we can be available to listen, to encourage, to provide tangible support. Brother Orville said the church as a family is well equipped with all the talent for us to have and emotional intelligence to care for those with emotional challenges. The Book of Ruth, Naomi, I love because you feel her emotion. Whoever wrote this story wants us to feel this woman's emotion. She's angry at God. She's disappointed. She feels as if, boy, life has dealt with her a really bad blow. But here she has a Ruth who God is using to remedy her situation. And in the end, the story ends with, look at it. It ends like that. Naomi took the child, laid him in her lap, and cared for him. Right? The woman living there said, Naomi has a son. And that's redemption right there. She is redeemed. Boaz plays, and next week we're going to talk about the men, because here's a man who has played the role in redeeming this woman. Sister Paula says, more than talking to them, assist in practical ways with food, clothing, help with child care, affirm with our words. Sister Charlotte says, our act of grace is an extension of the Lord's grace, which will restore her faith. And Brother Cornell said, do not just offer lip service, but help in tangible ways. We're going to end tonight on that note. I want us to turn to 1 Timothy 5, verse 1 Timothy 5. And I think Paul, in writing to Timothy, may have been reflecting on the plight of the widows, especially the story maybe of a Naomi. In 1 Timothy 5, verse 8, Brother John says our care must be practical as much as their challenges are really in those areas. Yes, people are lonely. People are lonely. You know, can you imagine? I don't know what it feels like to lose a child. In 10 years, you have lost a husband, a caregiver, a support, a listener, the one who is the breadwinner. You know, I heard somebody was talking the other day, and she was saying, boy, that she as a wife, she has learned some level of independence. Her husband helped her, you know, to be that kind of woman who, you know, if he passed away, that she would be able to function. And she said she knew of somebody else who was a wife who, boy, her husband did everything. And when he passed, she did not know what to do. It was difficult for her to make that transition, you know, from having somebody who ensure, you know, you have men like that. Everything is carpet, is well taken care of. And when they go, sometimes it's difficult for the wife and the children to pick up the pieces. But here's what Paul says, right? Indeed, protector and those days a widow was very vulnerable, right? Very vulnerable. Paul says, 1 Timothy 5 verse 8, and this is a verse that we all know. We've heard it so many times, right? If anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for his immediate family, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. The King James says worse than an infidel. And the context, when you have some time, maybe tonight or tomorrow, read 1 Timothy 5 from verses 1 to 16. The context for this particular statement is the care for widows. Is the care for widows. And Paul was given practical instructions to young Timothy to say, the widows that are in your care, the church and the family, the biological family and the spiritual family, need to come into partnership in ensuring that the widows in your congregation are taken care of. Not just spiritual care, holistic care. And that is the statement that he was making. And he was very, very strong in his statement. He said, listen, if you have these people in your family, immediate family, and they have preached the quote unquote the word of the Lord, you're saving souls, and you know, well, we don't save souls, but you're out there doing all that you can because you're doing the work of the Lord. In this context, he was saying, but if you have a vulnerable person in your family, someone who is like a Naomi, and you have not taken time out to reach out to that person, to provide whatever can be provided, then what's the message you're sending? What is the message you're sending? And that is something for us to consider as we consider those like a Naomi who are crushed in spirit, and they need the companion, the Ruth, the neighbor, that family member to come along and say, boy, where you go, I'm going to go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. That deep sense of loyalty to say, your people, my people, your God, my God. Me, I left everything. I'm leaving it all, Naomi. You're in a very vulnerable state now. I am going to care for you. And Paul says in Timothy, we are tasked like that to serve our husbands, our wives, our children, our mother-in-laws, our daughters-in-laws, whomever we call family. Let us not just extend our care to the church family, but our immediate family. And trust me, when we do so, we may see the fruits of our labor extended to salvation to our family members. Amen. Amen. We pause here for now. We pick up next week on this wonderful narrative, these characters that are teaching us so much. Sister Georgia, over to you.
Thank you, Brother Beckford.